In this video, we're going to take a hands-on look at how to implement Firebase Authentication in Android. This video is hands-on. I'll have a separate video where I go over an overview of authentication. And in this video, we're going to take a look at email authentication. I'll have another video where I also do a more advanced authentication with a different provider like Google. So let's get started. First of all, we need to go to our Firebase console, log in, and pick our application. I'm going to go to Authentication, and I'm going to go to Sign-In Method. This is where I can enable different sign-in providers, which is one big advantage of using Firebase Authentication, is that you don't have to make the user memorize yet another username and password. They can use an account that they already have. Let's go with a simple one, which is email. So I'll simply click here, and we'll choose Enable, and then Save. And you see it's now enabled. Now let's go to our project. We're going to need to add a few dependencies to our build.gradle file, and I'm in the one in app, in other words, the module level build.gradle. And first of all, verify that I have Firebase Core, which I've set up in a previous project, a previous video rather. I also need to add to this one Firebase Auth. Now, these libraries that I'm using are current at the time of this recording, but by the time you're watching it, there's a very likely chance they may have been updated. So I encourage you, instead of using the ones I'm using verbatim, go search and see if there's a newer version. Nonetheless, we can save, and then we go ahead and choose Sync Now. When you sync, you may get this error that's a bit annoying because it doesn't really tell you what's going on, but it says Android GMS Play Services Basement is being requested by various other libraries, so on and so forth. So I'm showing you this because it happened to me, it may happen to you. If it didn't happen to you, if your build was successful, go ahead, fast forward the video a few moments until I wrap this up. But lesson learned here, make sure that every library that you have is on the absolute latest version. So for Play Services, I need to bump this to 16.0.0. For Firebase Core, I need to bump this to 16.0.7. Even that minor version is important. And for Firebase Database, 16.0.6. Save. Let's go ahead and try again. And this time it should build successfully, should not give us that error. And sure enough, now you see it did give us that successful build. Again, I only point that out because this one took me a while to figure out when I was doing this by myself. Now with that being said, let's go to our GPS Applant screen. You see our current Save Specimen method is simply taking a DTO and saving it to Firebase Database, something we put together in a prior video. Here's what that screen looks like, and notice that when I choose Save, it just smiles at me. You might have seen a little confirmation toast that pops up indicating that it's saved, but nonetheless it did not prompt me for any kind of authentication because we have authentication turned off at the moment, and we want to turn that on. We want to turn it on with email. So let's see how we do that now. First, let's do a bit of refactoring because we're going to need to do a start activity for result and an on activity for result. So let's cut up the Save Specimen method. You see it's currently wired to the btn save button using Butterknife's on-click annotation. Let's keep that as it is because a lot of this save heavy lifting here really shouldn't be in a button handler anyway. It really should be in its own separate method. So let's terminate the Save Specimen method, and then let's make a new private method. We'll say private void Save Specimen to Firebase, something like that. And now in the Save Specimen method, let's figure out if the user is already logged in or not. So first of all, I need to make a Firebase user variable. We'll go all the way to the top here, and we'll say private Firebase user. So this user will be populated when our user has logged in. Go ahead and do an import there. The import's successful. That's good. That indicates that our libraries did import properly through build.gradle. So a good positive affirmation of that. Now Control F12 and let's go to our Save Specimen to Firebase method one more time. Okay, actually Save Specimen. So up here I'll say if user is not equal to null, and then just a little comment so we know why we're here. If the user is not null, then the user has authenticated already. No need to reprompt. And then we simply say Save Specimen to Firebase, just like so. On the other hand, if the user is null, we need to authenticate. The syntax here gets a little bit tricky, I'll forewarn you. So first of all, we need to make a list of providers. Let's say arrays.asList, and then inside of here we can create, well, first of all, import arrays. Inside of here we can create a comma-separated list of the providers that we're supporting through Firebase. So new auth UI.idpconfig.email builder, because we said we're going to use email, and then .build. Right now we're only going to have one item in our array, but as we support more providers like Twitter, Facebook, Google, we can continue to add a comma-separated list of builders here. Now we need to save this, guess what, as a list. So let's do a Control-Alt-V, and this is what I love about IntelliJ. Control-Alt-V automatically figures out the return type of that method, creates a variable of that return type, and then gives it a name that makes sense. Let's give it a name that makes more sense to us. Let's call it providers. And save. Now, it's as simple as doing our old friend start activity for result. Remember what that does is that typically we'll start another activity, and that other activity will return something to us. So we're essentially making a call out to this Firebase library. So we'll say start activity for result. Now, the intent's a little bit tricky here. It's not a normal intent that you would see. We have to go through another kind of series of method calls here. So let's say auth UI.getInstance, and of course capitalization here, very important. Create sign-in intent builder, so building an intent. .set available providers, and guess what? Providers, there we go. And I'll tell you what, I will break this up because this is going to get really long-winded really quickly. Set available providers .build. Boom. And there's the intent that we're calling. Holy smokes. Now we know that we need to give it a request code, something where we will recognize this when we get our callback in onActivity result. So let's give it a request code. We'll choose 1994. It was a good year. Any old number will work. Control-Alt-C will change this into a constant so we can give it something a bit more descriptive like authorization. Request code, something that we'll remember later. And hit enter, and there we go. So that's our call out to our provider. Now, Control F12, do we already have an onActivity result? We do. Okay, so our onActivity result is already handling the camera, and it's already handling result OK as a result code, which is important. So we want to make sure we're within the result OK. Inside of that, I'm going to do an else part here. And by the way, if you're creating this brand new and you don't already have an onActivity result, basically you're going to have everything I have here except the part that I'm highlighting. So just take that out, and if you're starting from scratch, override this method onActivity result, make the super call, request code equals result OK, and then do a brand new if test that looks like the one that I'm creating here. I'm just adding to an onActivity result I already have, which is why you already see that camera stuff there. So else if, like so, request code. Now remember that constant we just made, the authorization. Oh, there we go. You see, it makes a lot more sense. I should do double equal. Makes a lot more sense when we have a constant like authorization request code instead of a generic number 1994. We'll forget what 1994 means by the time we get down to here. So just like so. Now, inside of this, we'll say Firebase Auth, which again, it's another one of those libraries that's provided to us by the implementation we added to our build.gradle. And then we'll say get instance, and then .get current user. What do we do with this current user? Remember that user field that we created earlier? We simply save it into that user field. That way, the next time we try to save something, we know we have an authenticated user, and we can get some details about that user as well. And now, do you remember we had that save specimen to Firebase method, the refactored method that we made earlier? Let's go ahead and invoke the save specimen to Firebase method. That's probably a good idea to say else here if result code equal result canceled. Probably a good idea to handle this case as well, and then say if request code equal authorization request code. Do some kind of toast. this cannot save without authentication. Toast.length long and .show. And I'll let you, you clean that up to your own desire. You might not want to do a toast, maybe a snack bar, maybe something else. Naturally, we always want to put text in our strings XML, so a bit of refactoring to be done, but we probably should inform the user if something went wrong. Now, I've started the emulator in debug mode, and I've set several breakpoints, so let's go ahead and replicate what we did before. We pick our Eastern Redbud, location, University of Cincinnati, description, spring 2019. Beautiful time for redbuds in Cincinnati, by the way. Now, I'm going to choose save. And let's take a look here, move this out of the way. Is our user not null? Well, our user is null because we have not yet authenticated. So I choose F8, and we see we're creating our providers, and now we do a start activity for results. So I'm going to try to bring over the emulator just a little bit here so we can see what changes. I'm going to probably have to click back and forth quickly, but we'll choose F9, show the emulator again. Note that we have a new screen now, and interestingly enough, it's using the same theme of our application, so it gives us a sign-in. We'll put in an email address. First and last name. And then password, this doesn't need to be my email password, it's one that I'm making up just for this application, essentially. So we'll just say Plant Places, Plant Places 1994. We remember that was a good year, right? So nice long password like so. And now I choose save. And take a look. We're now back to our application. So you notice we didn't write those screens. Those screens were provided to us as part of Firebase Authentication. And now we're in the on activity result. So let's go ahead and choose F8. Result OK. Was it the camera that's calling us back? No. It's the authorization that's calling us back from our Firebase Authentication. So now do we have a user? Oh, look at this. I mouse over and sure enough we have a user, and we see there's a little bit of not very useful information, but nonetheless it's a not null user. And now save our specimen to Firebase, and we see this behavior is just what we had before, where we're populating our specimen DTO, and now we're calling Firebase, and now we're pushing our new specimen to Firebase. Let's go to Firebase and take a look. First of all, I'm going to click back on the Authentication tab, and wow, look at this. You see my that email address that I put in earlier. Provider, we have a little email icon, the date created, the date signed in, and then some kind of user ID that we can copy here. So you see that it gives us a really nice dashboard where we can see who's currently logged in. Let's go to our database as well. In our real-time database, we can click on specimens, and I have several that I created earlier, but let's go ahead and expand this one. We see University of Cincinnati with the funny capitalization that I put in earlier, spring 2019, and Cercis canadensis Eastern Redbud. So everything's looking really good so far, except for one thing that we do need to change. You see this, your security rules are defined as public. Let's take a look at those rules. So up until this point, we've opened read and write access to the world. Now, because we have authentication turned on, we want to restrict access. We'll do it a very simple way. We're going to remove the true here, and in quotes, we're going to say auth, and then exclamation, 2 equal signs, null. Auth is not equal to null. Let's do that for read and for write. So we're just saying we must have an authenticated user. Be careful, don't forget the comma after the read. And now publish. Now, you notice the warning has changed a little bit. It doesn't like that we're letting all authenticated users read and write, so we can embellish this a bit more and get a bit more restrictive, but at least now we are requiring authentication of some type, so it's not a red big error. It's just saying, hey, you might want to tweak this a little bit. Now, we could have changed these rules before we did the last demo, and that would have worked just fine. Either way, it was kind of quick to show the demo that way, but not to worry. We'll do it one more time. We'll save a new plant, and we'll confirm that with authentication turned on, that we sure enough will be able to see this new plant. So let me return back to the data, and we'll just kind of keep this, we'll keep this LAR NEC item, we'll keep that towards the bottom so that we can keep an eye on it. And go back, and let's make it something else that's new. We'll stick with the early spring bloomers, one of my favorite types of plant because they let us know that winter is over. It's time for spring. This time we'll go with crocus, one of the first ones to bloom. Once again, University of Cincinnati. We'll say maybe quad, so the quadrangle. And now we'll choose save. We know that at this point we are authenticated. So I'm not expecting to see that authentication come up one more time. We'll just move Firebase off just for a moment here, and let's follow the flow here. So this time we're in our save specimen. Is our user null? No, our user's not null, because remember, we got a user when we authenticated last time. So we choose F8, and now this goes to our save specimen to Firebase. And now once again, I'm going to, you notice it skipped all of the start activity for result and on activity result, because we don't need to do that. That was only for authentication. We've already authenticated. So I'll choose F9 and very quickly tab back over to Firebase. And you may have seen just off camera there a little bit, you may have seen things shift up. And if I click on this last item, take a look, Spring 2019, Crocus, Vernus, Crocus. So at this point, we're authenticated, and we know that the database requires that we have an authenticated user, so we're able to save using that authentication. One quick addendum to add here. This is specific to my project, which is why I've saved it towards the end. But as I was working through this example, when I changed the build.gradle, I noticed a dependency where I had to upgrade my compile version from 27 to 28. Again, because it's project specific, I put it at the end of the video. Not everyone's going to need this, but if you're following along the whole playlist and you wonder why didn't things compile, I wanted to just show you a couple of notes that may help out. This will bring you in line with where my project is when I push it to GitHub, which I'm about to do after this video. First of all, I bumped the compile SDK version and target SDK version from 27 to 28. With 27, it was okay building. It's just when I went to debug, it had some odd dependencies that it couldn't work out with some styling and some themes. So that was one change. One other small change, if I go to the Android manifest, I had to add a uses clear text traffic equals true here, because the JSON service that provides those plant names, the autocomplete, is over an HTTP connection, and those are not permitted by default in Android version 28. HTTPS is preferred, which at some point I will eventually go and make all that HTTPS. But in the meantime, I updated my Android manifest to this use clear text traffic. After all that, everything works, and I'll push that up to GitHub now. So I hope this video has been beneficial. I look forward to reading your comments. Thank you.